just tuning in, you are listening to Level Up Nation with myself, your host, Stacey Freer from the Dustin Pritchard Real Estate Team, joined with my co-host, Dustin Pritchard. How's it going?
Good, you?
Pretty damn good. I am so freaking excited to have longtime friend and also co-host, I guess you could have called it back in the day, Marie on the show with us, along with Chrissy, the two girls behind Alt Pop Repeat, the new fresh podcast. Ladies, how's it going?
Good. Good. How are you guys? Yeah, jazz hands.
Oh,
Good.
Everyone needs a good jazz hand.
right? I know, we got it too, but it's our gang sign with jazz hands. Go.
See, doesn't it kind of
These are spirit fingers, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, you're right. They're spirit fingers. I apologize. I can't get them straight.
So, ladies, I'm so excited to have you guys on because not only are you crushing it on the guest list, like the people who you are interviewing, they're so interesting and phenomenal. I'm pretty sure a lot of our listeners will recognize names like Biff Naked and George Strombo, not even going to try to murder that last name.
Ask Marie how to spell it. She actually knows. Out of like so many people, Marie's amazing at that. We always joke about that. How many people?
That was my.
Strombolopoulos. Yeah.
I was convinced that if I ever did the Much Music VJ search, that if I had to ask a question, that would be the question I would ask. I would say, okay, well now in this quiz period, spell George Strombolopoulos' last name, and then I would be prepared. I'd be able to prattle it off, and I'd get that point. Now, I didn't get selected to participate in the VJ search, which is really, I don't know if it's like, I think it's more their loss. And I think like we all can agree on that one, that, you know.
All of us agree.
And, right. And George said, though, that was one of the questions when you told him that when I was there.
Really?
Said, yeah, I don't remember that.
I totally
did say that. Yeah, he said, actually, that was one of the questions. I'm like, yeah, Marie. Yeah.
I know this shit. I know it. You send me in on a project. So, yes, I'm really good at spelling. What else?
So there's a fun fact for you. There's actually a VHS tape of moi doing a VJ search audition. And I did make it into like a quarterfinalist kind of thing. And I got to do a review on Much Music, where I actually met Rick, not George, and I totally wanted to meet George, but I mean, it is what it is.
You got Rick the 10th, though.
I got Rick rolled. It's all right.
Oh man, I can't relate to that. The only thing that I've done, I was in a movie. I was in a William Shatner movie. TV.
Nice. Did you meet Shatner?
Oh, dude, I got yelled at by Shatner. It was,
you were. I'm not the only one that got yelled at by Shatner.
Really?
He's a very irritable man.
That's awesome.
He actually doesn't. I went to ask him to do an interview at the podcast, and his PR people were like, he doesn't do interviews. He doesn't do podcast interviews. I'm like, really? He's like, he doesn't do them at all. I'm like, okay. So I left it at that. But I'm like, oh man, I really wanted Shatner.
Shout out by Shatner.
Yeah.
So ladies, can you tell us a little bit about Alt Pop Repeat, the podcast?
Yeah, I think so.
For sure.
Chrissy, where you go? Because I feel like I'll be like prattling, like Stacey and I are going to have a lot of catch-up things that we're going to slip through the show. So why don't you lead with it?
Okay.
Take it away.
Get my little small chat in. All Pop Repeat is a podcast that talks about how countercultures, alternative cultures, and subcultures, we call it a sync, but have been connected through pop culture. So we use the word a sync, and sync can mean many things, but for us it means connected. So we kind of show the lineage throughout the show of what were those catalyst moments that happened throughout history that have now turned something like, let's say, as a counterculture, which would be LGBT community, the cannabis movement, which is part of war on drugs, even civil rights, looking at ufology, which is like the belief and research of UFOs, how all of that stuff is now really embedded into our mainstream pop culture. And then subculture is another part of it, cosplay, bronies, things like that. So
drag,
yeah. There's so many, you'd be surprised on how many subcultures and countercultures there actually are out there. So
yeah.
I think that's the thing. It's funny. There's so many cultures. It's interesting that you guys are literally, I was calling you guys culture carvers because it's like you're
Nice.
slicing off a little bit of meat from each of these independent little nuggets here, little juicy
Yeah.
beef nuggets of culture.
That's
So
it. Like
Beef nugget of
pop
culture. I
culture.
think we're gonna have to put that on a T-shirt.
please do.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's a good visual. Like if you think of a giant like shawarma spinning and cooking, we're just shaving off little bits for it. Do
Yeah.
you want the shish taouk? Do you want to have the beef shawarma? Do you want the lamb? What do you want? Do you want the
Want a little My Little
falafel?
Pony? You
Right.
want little Ancient Aliens? Okay.
Right, exactly. That's a good combination.
Yeah, perfect combination.
So it is a perfect combination. And now I'm thinking of my mala salad. Anyways, drool. So one of the things that I really wanted to talk to you guys about, Marie, I know you've been on the Toronto scene for a very long time, not to date you, but because you're like practically only 25.
I started really young.
You did, kind of. But like if I could say I knew a scene queen, it would definitely be yourself. You do definitely have a lot of connections of all sorts of fabulous descent, which I think has been cool because as a marketing maven in Toronto, I think having those connections is really great because you're immersed in so many different literal cultures and avenues. And then Chrissy, I know you have a PR background.
I do,
Uh,
yeah.
so I think that's really interesting too because your job is to spin it and Marie's job is to put it out there, right?
Yeah, I don't use the word spin because spin's actually considered a bad word in our industry. It's like coming to the dark side. But yeah, my job is to promote it and to be able to and to get more views on it, to get more impressions, to get more people watching it and to create a buzz around the show. But we kind of do that together, but that's like a combination between like having a digital marketer and a PR person together is really, really strong because you can have something great, but we're lucky enough to be able to amplify it.
Absolutely. So with this kind of symbiotic relationship,
Yeah.
what made you guys want to put together a podcast? Just because it's cool or?
Well, we have a mutual love and curiosity. So I think that, and I mean, Stace, I know for sure you kind of fall into this world as well, where you love culture, you love mainstream culture, you love pop music and EDM, and you love all these crazy stories and documentaries, and it just kind of compounds, and it's that makes up our mainstream cultural selves. And when Chrissy and I have reconnected after quite a long time where we hadn't been in each other's lives. We reconnected, and as we did, we realized at that point, because before we had worked together professionally in one way or another, but at that point, we kind of like let the guard down and just started sharing all the things that we're interested in. And bit by bit, it was kind of like these stories compounding on top of each other. And we realized that we had a lot of mutual interests and that we're not these monolithic marketing PR people. We actually have much broader interests. And so next thing you know, it started to snowball. And long story short, it turned into a podcast, which also is kind of a fun project for both of us because not only do we get the chance to produce a project from creatively, we also get a chance to produce a podcast as far as the business side of it goes, which as we're learning very, very quickly, there is like, you either are a big fish in the big pond, like you're the Joe Rogans, you have a certain level of backing behind them. And so you enter into the marketplace already at the top level, or you're like us, really like super talented, excessively talented.
And really, really good looking.
Really good looking.
Really, really good looking. Give us the neck.
Oh, thanks guys. You know, and I make it free today too. But we have like this godlike talent, but what we don't have is we don't have that base of distribution and behind us. So we really had to figure that out for ourselves. We had to start carving the niche out. So the project kind of developed as both one that's creatively and artistically fulfilling, as well as both kind of challenging from a business side of things.
But isn't that where most businesses kind of start? It starts from a passion or a skill set or something like that, and then you're like, oh, this is a great idea. Let's try to make money at it, kind of thing. Is like we deal with a lot of entrepreneurs all the time. That's typically how it comes. It comes from an idea or a passion of some kind or another, and then let's make money at it.
Yeah, I think ours really. The nice thing I've always said to Marie too about our show is that you don't always get to be able to have a product, usually promoting other people's products. So you don't really get the chance to always promote your own product and use your own skills and towards something that you've done yourself. So it's been really nice to say, hey, let's take two people that are senior in what they do and be able to put what we've learned and everything over the years of knowledge behind that, and to also learn something new. We're learning new skills outside of PR and digital. I know I am in certain ways, from like producing and things like that, that obviously like it kind of goes hand in hand with PR, but it doesn't mean that I do it on the regular. It's not. So it's been this learning curve, but also then being able to utilize your skills that you've learned over the years, which is something that's really refreshing. And then you kind of, even though I'm still working in PR, I always find myself being able to like want to work on Alt Pop Repeat at times, because it's fulfilling. It's really fulfilling.
That's true.
Yeah, definitely. Well, and speaking of passion, I just kind of want to go through quickly your guest list that you've had so far. So if anyone's listening right now and you haven't had a chance to tune into Alt Pop Repeat, you can. They are all over the usual channels. But they've had guests like Jeremy Kenyon talking about sex, drugs, and USOs. UFOs.
USOs too, sure.
USOs.
Sure, sex, drugs, and USOs. There you go.
We do
unidentified sea objects. Yeah, that's fair.
Sexy.
Well, I mean,
sexy.
Isn't a United States officer, and wouldn't it be the United States officer, Captain Fravor, who shared? So technically, we do talk about USOs.
Yeah, and USOs are, like they say, they are a thing, so we can put that in there. Yeah.
United States officer.
Admitted that for me. That's amazing.
Way to go, Stacey. Change their name now.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And then we also have George Strombo talking about the impact of society. And then you had Matthew Santoro talking about socially woke or emotionally broke?
Spirituality.
Yeah, that's right. Well, that's the thing too with business. Everybody's getting into the actual energy behind it. So that man, this is such a great topic. And then Biff Naked, is punk dead? I don't think so. And then last but not least, we just had Dr. Jennifer Reed, PhD, talking about astrology. Oh my God, I think I'm stroking out.
It's okay. I'm kind of giggling over it because normally you're such like an eloquent, well-spoken, and then I'm like, how are you tripping over words like spirituality and UFOs? That's cool. We need to let's bring it down a little bit.
Because I've been literally talking since 9 a.m. and it is now 6:24. So I think my tongue time has expired.
Nice. Tongue time. I like that. I'm going to use that now.
That's a totally different.
I have a tongue time between 9 and 6, and then after that, I'm tongue tied.
Yeah, you should. Yeah, exactly.
No,
it's my too much tongue time.
Off the job. Can I ask you ladies a question? Like, you guys have this amazing lineup of guests, and you're talking about some of the coolest topics. Why did you choose podcast as your medium to get your message out there?
It's a good question.
Theater of the mind, minimum viable product.
Yeah. Also conversational. Marie and I like to talk. So it gave us a platform to be able to do that. I personally and I think we both like podcasts, and it's somewhere that you can explore. Like, it's very explorative. Like YouTube is too, but there is, I find, a look to YouTube as well too. And there's like this more of a YouTube formula. I wouldn't say there's a podcast formula yet. I think there's play more in the podcast world. You can do anything you want in the pod. You can do it in YouTube too, but it's just, there's a different medium. I don't know. I like the medium way more than it doesn't mean I don't like YouTube. I watch YouTube all the time, but in this context, so far we started off with podcasting.
Yeah. And it's a good jumping off point.
Yeah. That's a
Okay,
good point.
so jumping
It's
off
great.
point and minimal viable product, those are two things that you said, Marie, that were really interesting to me as a business owner. So you think that podcasting is one of a great ways to figure yourself out, engage with your audience, express your value, that type of thing, and then what? Like a lot of people will start a business and start a podcast to promote their business. It sounds to me like
Yeah.
you're promoting your passion and turning it into a business.
Absolutely. I mean, content, we've heard the saying for a long time that content is king.
Yeah.
And that the unfortunate side to that is that there's a lot of noise that's being contributed to online content like YouTube and podcasts, and even looking at Twitter and Instagram. There's a lot of people that are creating, everyone has an opportunity to have a say. It doesn't mean that everyone should have a say. So when we got into this space, we wanted to create something that was both a value, and I think the challenge of making it a popular show was really a compelling one for both of us. It also allowed us to look at what is sellable about content. What are the sellable parts about content? So we started to examine our show from different angles that would allow us to say, okay, cool. Well, if we are bringing sponsors on the show, for example, what are all the assets that a sponsor could potentially buy to help support us to create this content? And we started looking at the shows as unique little ecosystems, little products into themselves, and like a pack of cookies, but each sleeve is like a different flavor. So if you want to have, if you want to work with us and you want to sponsor, for example, the Punk is Dead episode, what is the value to you? Well, there's a certain amount of impressions we can guarantee from that. And we also know that there is a certain level of perpetuity that comes with it. So if you come and you sponsor the show itself, then your name is going to be associated with that. As we continue to grow, you end up benefiting exponentially for really just one price. So, I mean, we start seeing, and then also in the show itself, live speaking gigs, it kind of like, we start seeing there's a lot more to it than just it being a quote unquote podcast. It isn't just this one little thing. There's actually a lot of pieces to it, and they can live in many different ways online.
Yeah. And a lot of people that want to start podcasts, they're usually something else. Like, for example, to start a podcast is a great way if you wanted to do a scripted or unscripted story. Podcast finds your audience, it gets people hooked. So a lot of times when people want to make TV shows or films or things like that, they start with the medium of podcasting, and then other people, like for example, producers will come and follow them and say, we want to turn this into a TV show, or we want to turn this into something else. So that becomes one, right, crossing fingers, that becomes one avenue. And Marie's right, like sponsorship, live events, even just going to like podcast camps, things like that. There's so many opportunities, social media, they're then getting, that's not even just through a distribution channel. And then once you get your distribution, that can change the game as well too. But just regular podcasting, you can do so many things with it outside of just doing a show. But
do you guys feel that podcasting is kind of the new reality TV of our generation? Kind of like everybody hopped on that.
Dude, like don't even. No, I think that, look, here's the reality of it. How long has radio been around for?
Yeah,
like we're
terrestrial radio has been along for a while. Yeah, but terrestrial
before we had television.
Right. And terrestrial radio is so different from podcasting. It is not the same thing. If people think that terrestrial radio, which is like regular radio, is the same, it's not. They're very different. They're different mediums, and they're done in different ways.
I do think, like, if we're looking at the mainstream pop radio stations that play music, I wouldn't agree that there's very similar. But if we're looking at public broadcasting, we're looking at NPR in the United States, we're looking at CBC and BBC, we're looking at long format shows that are anywhere from 60 minutes to 90 minutes. And they're produced episodes with clips in their documentary style, and they're very similar to podcasts. So I would argue in a lot of ways that podcasts have been around for a long time, but there's two things that were getting in the way of it. One, access to distribution channels and audience didn't exist for the average person, nor did the tools exist for people to be able to produce it. Now we have phones. Look, like I'm on my cell phone, I can tell because my video is vertical, but we have the tools in order to access. Today, I made a very good insightful discovery about Chrissy and I. If you're fans of late 80s cinema, I'm like, we're like Bill and Ted.
No.
Oh,
like-
right. Marie texted me and she's like, and I just started laughing out loud. She sent me a voice note and she's like, I've come to an understanding that we are Bill and Ted. And I was like, oh my God, we are.
We're Bill and Ted. Okay, besides the fact, like, obviously I'm Keanu Reeves because I'm the tallest one.
Yes, and
But I mean,
That makes sense.
it makes sense.
Yep.
But I mean, the thing is that we have a show that's a thesis, and we explore this through bringing on by searching out guests who have a historical context to the subject matter at hand. Like, for example, Tommy Chong is coming on to talk about cannabis in a future episode. We have Dave Foley, who's going to be joining us to talk about UFOs. Trinity the Tuck Taylor, who's the winner of season
Marie, you're not supposed to tell everybody.
Why?
You're telling everybody our exclusives.
It's okay.
Well, they're coming out. I mean, it's not, we've already recorded the shows. They're coming out. There's only one that might not be coming out.
This is your platform to promote yourself. I cannot stop stuttering today. I am stuttering Stacy. Anyways, I'm so sorry, guys. We are running a little low on time for this podcast. Dustin, it is time for your final thoughts. I'm glad I got that out without stuttering. And
his final thoughts on this one, jeez. Oh, you know what? I like how you did it, ladies. I like how you grew together as you found your passion. You figured out exactly, what you really like to talk about. You probably have conversations with each other all the time about these kind of topics and cultures and things like that. And then it turned into something much bigger and with a lot more potential, which is, for those of you who are listening today, and Level Up Nation is all about entrepreneurship and taking your business and yourself to the next level. Start with a passion. Start with what makes you happy, because like, you know the old axiom, if you love what you do, you never work a day in your life, man. I would love to do this all day long, every day. It would not bother me at all. It's so much fun to do stuff like this with you ladies, right? And if you're an entrepreneur, start with a passion. Start with your passion, turn it into a business, make money at it.
Amen.
That's it, man.
Totally. Yeah, it's so true.
All right, guys, for everyone who's been listening to Level Up Nation, our special guests today were Marie and Chrissy from the podcast Alt Pop Repeat. If you have any questions for these ladies, please hit us up in the comments or go over and check them out at altpoprepeat.com to listen to some of those pretty amazing guests. I don't know if you guys can hear my dog.
Yeah,
is that your dog? I thought it was Chrissy's dog.
Yeah. No, he's
dog?
having like a meltdown right now.
That's the time for a walk, damn it, Mom.
Pretty much.
That's right.
So, anyways.
On that note, thank you so much for joining us, ladies. For those of you watching and listening, visit us at levelupnationlive.com for all the rest of our episodes, and you can chase us down, get to know us a little bit better, and watch all the stuff that we do. So that's levelupnationlive.com.
I'll chase you down. Oh, I'll chase you down.
All right, you chase us down, and we'll go for a paddleboard on the lake.
Nice.
All right. Yeah. Okay.
All right, we'll talk to you guys next time, and we'll see the rest of you guys.
We'll try to say the sentence, talk to you later. Ciao for now.
Hey, Chrissy, this is where we go. And we're done.
We're done.